The setting sun painted the buildings in warm colors, and the streets grew quieter. My footsteps sounded louder than usual, maybe because of the silence inside me. When I arrived, they were already waiting. Their expression this time was different, more thoughtful, almost apologetic. We sat down, and they spoke slowly, choosing their words carefully. They explained how the story had changed, how new details had come to light, how some things that seemed alarming before were now clearer. They said they didn't want misunderstandings to grow any further. Their honesty surprised me. I expected something heavier, something more stressful. Instead, what I received was clarity. As they talked, I felt tension leaving my shoulders. They weren't accusing me. They weren't upset. They simply wanted things to be right again. When the conversation ended, I thanked them again and walked back home with a lighter heart. The night air felt cool, and the stars were beginning to appear. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace returning. Back home. I changed into comfortable clothes and sat near the window, watching the quiet street outside. My thoughts were still swirling, but they weren't heavy anymore. They felt manageable, like something I could work through. As the night grew deeper, I reflected on everything that had happened. I realized that sometimes life teaches us lessons in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes we face confusion, sometimes fear, sometimes frustration. But in the end, we grow. We understand ourselves better. We become stronger not because life is easy, but because we learn how to navigate it with courage. That night, before going to bed, I told myself that the journey wasn't over. There were still things to fix, still conversations to have, still steps to take. But at least I wasn't standing still anymore. I was moving forward, slowly but surely, and sometimes that is all a person needs. The next morning after the showcase, the whole school felt different for her. When she walked through the gates, students who never looked at her before now turned their heads. They didn't stare in a rude way like they used to. Instead, their eyes showed surprise, respect, and sometimes a little guilt because they had judged her without knowing who she really was. She walked slowly, not rushing, feeling like something heavy had been lifted from her shoulders. She wasn't walking with pride or arrogance. She was just calm, the same quiet girl she had always been. But now people finally saw her differently. Some students whispered to each other as she passed, but the whispers were not cruel anymore. They weren't laughing at her or mocking her. They were talking about her talent, still amazed at how someone they barely noticed could be so gifted. A few students even smiled at her, tiny smiles that seemed unsure. They wanted to show they respected her now, but didn't know if she wanted to talk to them. She didn't blame them for that. She knew many of them didn't mean harm before. They had just followed the louder voices. When she reached her classroom, she hesitated for a moment before going in. She wasn't afraid, but she didn't know how things would be today. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The room felt slightly quieter for a second, not in a bad way, but like everyone realized she was there. A girl sitting near the window waved at her shyly. She had never spoken to her before, but today she gently said, "Your performance was amazing." Her voice was soft but warm. She didn't expect to hear something like that, so she paused for a second. Then she gave a small nod and smiled politely. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real. Her teacher walked in soon after and, before starting the lesson, looked at her with kind eyes. "You did something wonderful yesterday," the teacher said. "You reminded everyone that talent and strength don't always speak loudly." The class clapped lightly, not because they were forced to, but because they truly meant it. She felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. But she was also happy. Later during the break, she sat outside on a bench under the shade. She liked this spot because it was quiet. She didn't expect anyone to join her. So she was surprised when a boy from her class walked up, holding his notebook awkwardly. He wasn't one of the bullies. He was one of the kids who usually stayed out of trouble and avoided drama. "Can I sit here?" he asked. She nodded, and he sat down slowly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She didn't mind the silence. She knew not everyone understood how comfortable quiet moments could be. After a while, he said, "I wish I had the courage to show my drawing in the talent show too. Seeing you perform. It helped me. I want to try next year." She didn't know she had inspired someone. She wasn't trying to do anything like that. She just wanted to show her passion. But hearing that made her smile again. She told him quietly, "You should. It's scary, but it feels good afterward." The boy nodded, thinking about her words seriously, and for the rest of the break, they didn't say much more. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. Later that day, she walked to her locker to get her books. As she opened it, she heard footsteps behind her. She expected maybe another student coming for their locker too, but when she turned around, she saw the bullies. The same students who used to laugh at her, mock her voice, push her books, and call her names. They didn't look the same now. They weren't smirking. They weren't whispering something mean. Their faces showed nervousness, something she had never seen on them before. The lead bully looked down for a moment, rubbed the back of his neck, then said, We wanted to say sorry." She didn't respond at first, because she wasn't sure if she heard correctly. He continued, still avoiding eye contact. "We were wrong about you. We shouldn't have treated you like that. We didn't know you were, really talented." The apology wasn't perfect, but she understood that saying sorry wasn't easy for them. She appreciated their effort, even if their words were clumsy. She didn't need them to admire her talent to stop bullying her. She just wanted them to treat her like a normal person. She didn't want to hold bitterness in her heart. So she gave a small nod and said, "It's okay." The bullies seemed relieved. They quickly stepped aside and left. She wasn't angry with them anymore. They didn't know her. And sometimes people fear or mock what they don't understand. She hoped they learned something from this. After school, she went home feeling lighter than she had in a long time. Her family welcomed her warmly, asking about her day. She told them everything that happened, not in a dramatic way, but in her calm, simple style. Her family was proud of her, not just for her talent, but for staying true to herself. In the following weeks, life at school slowly changed. She wasn't suddenly popular or surrounded by groups of friends. That wasn't the kind of person she was. But people respected her now. They didn't ignore her or treat her like she didn't exist. Some students invited her to join group projects. Others asked her questions about her talent. Genuinely curious, she made a few new friends. The kind who didn't expect her to talk all the time, who enjoyed her calm company, who didn't judge her for being quiet. She found comfort in knowing she didn't have to change who she was for people to like her. They liked her for her true self, with the support of her teacher. She joined a small after-school club related to her talent. For the first time, she shared her passion with others who felt the same joy. They encouraged her to join competitions outside school. Although she felt nervous, she agreed. Preparing for these competitions gave her a sense of purpose. Not because she wanted awards or recognition, but because her talent made her feel alive. It was something that belonged to her alone, something she had worked hard for, something that helped her express herself without needing many words. Every time she practiced, she remembered those days when people laughed at her, not with anger, but with gratitude. Those moments pushed her to grow stronger silently. They shaped her into someone who didn't break easily. On the day of her first competition outside school, she stood on the stage again. The audience was different, filled with strangers who didn't know her story. But she didn't feel as scared as she once did. She knew she had already faced one of the hardest challenges, showing herself to people who had judged her. Now, she was standing in front of people who came to appreciate talent. That alone made her feel peaceful. When it was her turn, she gave her best. Her performance wasn't perfect, but it was filled with heart. That mattered more. She didn't win first place, but she earned a special mention, and many people clapped for her. She walked off the stage proud of herself, knowing she had grown. Over time, she continued to participate in more events, improving slowly, step by step. Her schoolmates followed her journey, cheering her on from afar. Even the bullies now changed, treated her with respect. She had proven something important, not only to others but also to herself. Silence is not weakness. Quiet. People carry strength that doesn't need loud words. By staying true to who she was, she showed the world that sometimes the strongest voice is the one that speaks through actions, not volume. And from that point on, she lived with more confidence, more peace, and a clear understanding of her worth. She didn't need to shout to be heard. People listened because they finally understood who she really was in the end. She didn't just surprise her school with her talent. She taught them a valuable lesson. Ever judge someone just because they are quiet? You never know what incredible things they may be carrying inside their heart. Lena had always been the kind of girl who blended into the background without even trying. On her first day at the new school, she walked through the gates with her shoulders slightly lowered and her backpack pulled tightly against her side. She didn't look around or try to make eye contact with anyone. She simply moved with quiet steps, hoping no one would pay attention to her. The school hallways were loud and full of students, who all seemed to know where they were going. Voices bounced off the walls, laughter filled the air, and groups of friends stood clustered around lockers, sharing stories from the weekend. Lena felt like a tiny dot in a world that moved too fast. She kept her head low and followed the room numbers printed on the walls until she reached her classroom. When she stepped inside, almost everyone had already arrived. A few students glanced her way as she walked toward the last empty seat at the back of the room, but no one said anything. Lena preferred it that way. She placed her bag on the floor and quietly opened her notebook, waiting for the teacher to start the lesson. For the first few days, she barely spoke a word. She answered questions only when the teacher called her name, and even then, her voice came out soft and careful, like she wasn't sure she had permission to use it. Most classmates didn't notice her at all, and she liked staying invisible. It made everything easier. But 3 students in the class did notice her, and not in a good way. They sat near the center of the room, always talking, always laughing, always trying to be the center of attention. They didn't understand people like Lena, quiet, gentle, and alone. Her silence made them curious at first, but soon that curiosity turned into something else. It started small. One afternoon, as the teacher wrote notes on the board, one of the boys turned around and whispered loudly to his friends, "She doesn't talk because she's hiding something." His words weren't meant for Lena, but she heard them clearly. The other snickered, and though she kept her eyes on her notebook, she felt her face warm with embarrassment. Over the next few days, the comments continued. They whispered to each other, making jokes about how she never said anything and calling her the silent shadow. At lunch, they noticed she always sat alone at a corner table near the window. One day, as they passed by, they made exaggerated silent motions, pretending to talk without sound. They laughed loudly as if it was the funniest thing in the world. Lena didn't react. She kept her eyes on her food and pretended she didn't hear them. Deep down, she hoped that if she didn't respond, they would get bored and move on. But kids who like attention rarely stop when they think they've found someone easy to tease. One morning, while the class waited for the teacher, the teasing moved beyond whispers. The same boy who had started everything turned around again, this time addressing Lena directly. "Hey," he said, waving his hand dramatically. "Can you even talk? Or are you on mute mode all the time?" His friends burst into laughter. The class went quiet for a moment, waiting to see what Lena would do. She felt dozens of eyes on her. Her heart pounded, and for a split second, she considered saying anything to make them stop. But the words stayed trapped in her throat. She simply lowered her eyes and looked at her hands. The laughter returned even louder. "See," the boy said. "Told you. Mute mode." Some students looked uncomfortable, but no one said a word. The teacher walked in soon after, and everyone rushed back to their seats pretending nothing had happened. Lena kept her head down for the rest of the lesson, trying to ignore the heavy feeling in her chest. When the final bell rang that day, she walked home alone as usual. Her steps were slow, and her thoughts were heavy. She wondered if things would ever get better. Maybe she was foolish to believe she could come to a new school and quietly blend in. She didn't want trouble. She didn't want drama. She only wanted peace. As she reached her house, she paused for a moment at the front door and took a deep breath. Inside, her world was different, calm, familiar, and safe. She walked to her room, closed the door behind her, and set her backpack on the floor. Her eyes moved across the room, landing on the one thing that always made her feel like she belonged, Against the wall stood a tall wooden shelf, full of carefully arranged items related to her secret passion. This was the part of her life no one at school knew about. This was the part of her she kept hidden, not because she was ashamed, but because it felt too precious to expose to people who didn't care. She walked to the shelf and ran her fingers gently over the materials she used every day. The tools she practiced with, the objects she had spent years learning to master, and the pieces she had created with her own hands. Each one held a memory, a lesson, a story. This skill, her skill, was something she loved deeply. Something she had worked tirelessly to perfect since she was small. Something that gave her strength when the world felt too loud or too cruel, but it was also something she had never shared with anyone outside her home. Lena sat down on the small stool beside the shelf and picked up one of the objects. It fit comfortably in her hand, and as soon as she held it, she felt the tension in her body begin to fade. Practicing always calmed her mind. It reminded her that even if the world didn't see her, she still had something special inside her. She still mattered as the evening sun drifted in through the window. Painting warm lines across the floor, Lena practiced for hours. Her movements were quiet, smooth, and filled with focus. She didn't think about the bullies, or the laughter, or the whispers. She only thought about the skill she loved and the comfort it brought her. Her parent passed by the doorway at one point, watching her for a moment with a gentle smile. They didn't interrupt. They knew these moments were important to her. When Lena finally stopped, the room was dark except for the small lamp on her desk. She placed her tools back on the shelf and sat quietly for a moment, absorbing the calm she had created. She knew tomorrow she would have to face school again. She knew the teasing might continue, but she also knew she had something inside her that no one could take away. The world only saw a silent girl, someone easy to overlook, easy to mock, easy to misunderstand. But they didn't know her story. They didn't know the hours she spent honing a skill most kids her age couldn't even imagine. They didn't know the strength she carried quietly in her heart, and if the day ever came when she revealed her hidden talent, they would realize something important. Silence did not mean weakness. Sometimes silence meant a person was simply waiting for the right moment to show who they truly were. Lena curled up on her bed, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. She thought about school, about the faces that stared at her, about the laughter she pretended not to hear. It hurt, but she didn't let it break her. She whispered softly to herself, "One day they'll see." She didn't know how or when. She didn't know what would change things. But deep down, she believed that the truth always found a way to shine through. For now, she would stay quiet, stay steady, and keep practicing the one thing she loved more than anything else. The world might judge her silence, but her heart knew a different story, a story waiting for its moment to begin. The next week at school felt heavier for Lena. Every morning, she walked through the gate with the same quiet steps, hoping maybe this day would be different. Maybe the boys would ignore her. Maybe people would stop staring whenever she spoke. But deep down, she knew things rarely changed overnight. The teasing continued the moment she stepped into the classroom. The same group sat together, whispering and glancing her way. They weren't loud enough for the teacher to hear, but loud enough for Lena to catch every word. She kept her eyes on her notebook, pretending their voices were just background noise. She wished she could disappear sometimes, not forever, but just for a moment, just long enough to catch a break from the way people judged her silence. But disappearing wasn't an option. She had to sit through each class, each lunch break, or each hallway walk where someone might laugh or whisper behind her. On Wednesday, the teasing took a new turn. During a group activity, the teacher asked everyone to form small teams. Lena looked around, waiting to see if anyone would ask her to join them. Most groups formed instantly, with friends pulling chairs together and chatting eagerly. She stood near her desk, unsure of where to go, before she could take a step. One of the boys shouted across the room, "Let her be. She doesn't talk anyway. She'll just stare at us the whole time." His friends laughed while the rest of the class fell into an awkward silence. Lena's face grew warm. She wanted to say something, but her voice got stuck again. The teacher, busy helping another group, didn't hear any of it. A girl from another table looked at Lena sympathetically and gestured for her to join their group. But by then, Lena felt too embarrassed to move. She simply sat back down, pretending she had work to finish alone. The girl looked like she wanted to help, but the moment passed too quickly. The rest of the class went by in a blur. Lena did the assignment quietly, not really hearing anything around her. She felt small, like she didn't belong anywhere in that room. During lunch break, she sat at her usual table by the window. The cafeteria buzzed with noise students, laughing, talking, trading snacks. She opened her lunchbox slowly, trying to avoid attention. But the boys spotted her again. They walked by her table, talking loudly on purpose. "Maybe she's a robot," one of them said. "Robots don't talk much, right?" Another boy added, "Yeah, she probably charges at home." They burst into laughter and kept walking. Lena kept her eyes on her lunch, but her hands felt shaky. She took a sip of water to calm herself, breathing slowly until the moment passed. But everything changed later that afternoon, just before the final bell. The school principal made an announcement through the speakers. "Students, we are excited to invite everyone to our annual talent showcase. Any student who wishes to participate may sign up in the main hall tomorrow morning. We welcome all kinds of talents." The class buzzed with excitement. Everyone turned to their friends, already talking about what they might perform. Some wanted to dance, some wanted to sing, others wanted to do comedy or magic tricks. Even the teacher smiled. Knowing this event was always a favorite, the boys in the center immediately started talking loudly about what they would do. One of them joked about pretending to be a comedian and making fun of people. They laughed, making big gestures and acting like they already owned the stage. Lena, sitting quietly in the back, listened without looking up. Her mind was racing faster than it had in days. A talent showcase. She hadn't performed in front of anyone before. Her skill was something she kept private, something she protected. But the idea stirred something inside her, a tiny spark she hadn't felt at school since she arrived. Was this her chance? Could she stand on a stage and show the world the thing she loved most? Her heart fluttered just thinking about it. After school, she walked home faster than usual. As soon as she got inside her room, she went straight to her shelf. The tools, the materials, the pieces she had practiced with for years, they all seemed to shine a little brighter that day. She sat down and began practicing, more focused than she had been all week. Her parent knocked softly and peeked into the room. "Long day?" they asked gently. Lena nodded. "You're practicing early today," they said, walking in and sitting beside her. She hesitated before speaking. There's something at school. A talent showcase." Her parents' face lit up with interest. "Are you thinking about signing up?" Lena looked down at her hands. "I'm not sure why not. You're amazing at what you do." "People at school don't know that," Lena whispered. "They only see." She paused, searching for the right words. "They only think I'm quiet, all the time." Her parent placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Being quiet doesn't mean you can't shine, and you don't have to do it for them. You can do it for yourself." Lena took a breath. She knew they were right. She practiced for another hour, each movement reminding her of how much she loved her skill. It was something she understood deeply, something she could express without needing many words. That night, after dinner, she sat at her desk and thought about the showcase again. She imagined standing on a stage with everyone watching. Would they laugh? Would they mock her like they did in class? Or would they finally see her the way she wished they would? The next morning, she woke up earlier than usual. She dressed quietly, packed her school bag, and took one last look at her practice shelf before leaving the house. When she arrived at school, the main hall was crowded. Students pushed in from all directions, rushing to the sign-up board. Lena stood near the entrance, watching. Many names were already written down, some in big, bold letters, as if the students wanted to make sure everyone noticed. She stepped forward slowly, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure if she was ready. She wasn't even sure if she belonged on that list. But then she remembered the way she felt whenever she practiced. The calm, the focus, the happiness. She picked up the marker and quietly wrote her name. Her handwriting was small and neat, tucked between two large names above and below it. She stepped back and stared at it for a moment. There it was, her choice, her moment. Behind her, the boys approached the board, laughing and pushing each other. "Who signed up already?" one of them said, scanning the names quickly. One of them suddenly stopped and squinted. "Wait, no way. She signed up." He turned back to look at Lena, who stood a few feet away. "She's going to perform? What is she going to do? Stand there in silence?" he joked. The others laughed loudly, drawing the attention of students nearby. Lena felt the familiar warmth rise in her cheeks, but this time she didn't look away. She held her gaze steady. Even though she didn't say a word, the boys continued making jokes as they scribbled their own names down, talking about how funny it would be to watch her fail on stage. But inside Lena, something felt different. Their words hurt, but they didn't shake her completely the way they used to. She had already made her choice. She wasn't going to erase her name from the board. She spent the rest of the day quiet, but not in the same way as before. There was a hint of determination in her silence, small but growing, courage that even she didn't fully understand yet. When she got home that afternoon, she practiced even longer than usual. Every move she made felt like a step forward. Every minute she spent improving her skill felt like another layer of strength building inside her. The teasing at school hadn't stopped. If anything, it had gotten worse since she'd signed up. But now she had something to look forward to. Something that made her feel more than just the silent girl. That reminded her she wasn't as weak as they thought. She was preparing for a moment they would never expect, a moment when the quiet girl would finally speak without saying a single word. The days leading up to the talent showcase moved slowly for Lena, but her heart felt fuller each day. She still walked to school quietly, still kept her head down in the halls, and still sat at her usual spot in the classroom. But inside her, something had shifted. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a soft strength, like a small flame that kept growing even when the world around her tried to blow it out. She practiced every night at home, pouring everything she had into her skill. Her parent noticed how focused she had become. They would peek into her room sometimes, smiling with quiet pride, but never interrupting. They knew she needed this time. They knew how much this meant to her. At school, however, things grew more difficult. The boys who teased her seemed to have new energy after seeing her name on the sign-up sheet. Every chance they got, they whispered jokes or made comments about how she would freeze on stage or mess up in front of everyone. One morning, as she placed her books on her desk, one of them walked by and said loudly, "Make sure you don't trip up there. The whole school will be watching." His friends laughed as they passed her desk. Lena kept her eyes on her notebook, refusing to let them see how much their words bothered her. She felt her chest tighten, but she breathed through it slowly, the way she always did when she practiced her skill. She knew the showcase was coming soon. She knew they wouldn't expect what they were about to see. One afternoon during lunch, she sat alone at her usual window seat. The cafeteria was louder than usual because students were talking non-stop about the showcase. Some practiced their singing while waiting in line. Others rehearsed dance moves beside their tables. A group of boys tried to show off magic tricks with playing cards. Everyone seemed excited. Lena listened quietly while picking at her food. She didn't join in the conversations or the laughter, but she wasn't sad. She simply observed as she always did. She watched how people moved, how they expressed themselves, how they talked loudly, proudly, without fear. She wished she had that bravery, even for a moment as she stared out the window. The girl who had tried to include her during the group activity sat down across from her. Her name was Rena. She had a warm smile and kind eyes, and she placed her lunch on the table gently, as if not wanting to startle Lena. "Is it okay if I sit here?" Rena asked. Lena nodded slowly. For a moment, neither of them said anything, but Rena didn't seem bothered by the silence. She opened her lunch and took a bite before speaking again. "I saw your name on the showcase list," she said with a soft smile. "I think it's cool you signed up." Lena looked up for a moment, surprised. No one had said anything kind about it at school yet. Rena continued, "Don't listen to those boys. They make fun of everyone. Last year, they laughed at a kid who did a poetry reading, but he still performed and did great. People like them just talk a lot. They don't mean much." Lena stayed quiet, but but her chest felt a little lighter listening to her. Rena smiled again. Whatever you're planning to do, I'm sure it's going to be good. Lena gave a small nod. She wanted to say thank you, but she wasn't good with words when someone was being kind to her. Still, Rena seemed to understand. She didn't push her to talk more. She just ate quietly, enjoying the peaceful moment. After lunch, Lena felt a little more confident. She still didn't talk to many people, and she still felt nervous about the showcase, but she wasn't alone completely. Someone at school believed in her even, if just a little. That afternoon, the teacher announced that the performers would be allowed to rehearse on the stage. After school, if they wanted to get comfortable with the setup, most students cheered, excited for the chance to practice in front of their friends. Lena felt her stomach twist. She didn't want to rehearse in front of anyone. Her skill wasn't something she wanted to reveal until the actual performance. She preferred the quiet of her bedroom, a steady rhythm of practice where no one judged her. But something told her she should at least see the stage before the big day. She waited until the crowd of students headed toward the auditorium. They practiced loudly dancing, singing, laughing, shouting instructions to each other. She watched from the back of the room at first, hoping no one would notice her. Up close, the stage looked bigger. The lights, the curtains, the microphones, they all looked intimidating. One of the teachers helping with the showcase noticed her standing alone. "Are you performing?" the teacher asked warmly. Lena nodded. "Would you like to try the stage? You don't have to do your whole act, just walk around a little." Lena hesitated. Many students were still there, and she didn't want to draw attention. But she took a small step forward, then another. The teacher gestured kindly, encouraging her. When Lena stepped onto the stage, her heart thumped loudly in her chest. The wooden floorboards creaked softly under her shoes. The auditorium seats looked huge from up there. It felt like stepping into a different world. She took a deep breath and let the feeling settle. It wasn't exactly comfortable, but it wasn't as terrifying as she thought. She imagined the moment she would perform, how she would focus on her skill, how her hands would move, how she would forget the faces watching her. The boys suddenly walked into the auditorium. They spotted her on stage instantly. "Look who's practicing," one of them shouted. The sound echoed across the room. Some students turned to look. Lena froze for a second. She looked at the teacher, who offered her a reassuring nod. "Ignore them," the teacher whispered. Lena nodded once, stepped off the stage, and quickly left the room. She didn't want to give the boys the satisfaction of seeing her upset. That evening at home, she practiced again. This time, she stayed up later than usual. Her hands moved faster and smoother, her focus deep and intense. She imagined herself on that stage, not freezing, not breaking, but performing with the same confidence she felt in her room. Her parent knocked softly. "You're working hard," they said gently. Lena nodded. "Are you nervous about the showcase?" Lena hesitated before answering. "A little." "A little is normal," her parent said. "Even people who talk all the time get scared before standing in front of a crowd. But you've practiced for years. That's something no one can take away from you." Lena looked at her tools, her materials, the pieces she had created. They were all part of her story, a story no one at school understood yet. The next day, the school placed posters around the halls, showing the list of performers in their order. Lena's name was in the middle of the lineup, between a guitar performance and a dance group. Students read the list excitedly, pointing at their friends' names. When the boys saw Lena's name again, they started laughing. "This is going to be the funniest part of the show," one of them said. But Lena no longer shrank from their words the way she had before. She didn't look at them, but she didn't walk away either. She just kept moving forward, her bag pulled against her shoulder. The days went by quickly after that. Students practiced. In the halls, in the classrooms, even outside during breaks, teachers reminded everyone to be respectful and supportive. Posters decorated the walls with bright colors, reminding the school that the showcase was just around the corner. Lena practiced every night with more passion than ever. The nervousness was still there, but it no longer controlled her. It lived beside her courage, not instead of it. She knew she had something special. She knew she could surprise them. On the day before the showcase, her teacher asked her quietly, "Do you feel ready?" Lena nodded softly. "I'm glad," the teacher said with a smile. "I can't wait to see what you do." It was the first time anyone at school had expressed excitement about her performance. It made her heart feel warm. That night, Lena barely slept. Her mind kept imagining the moment she would walk on stage. The moment she would show the entire school what she had spent years mastering. She wasn't doing it to impress the boys. She wasn't doing it to prove anything to anyone except herself. She wanted to share her skill because it was part of who she was, her quiet strength. The next morning, she woke up before her alarm. She dressed neatly, packed her bag, and gave one last look to her practice shelf before leaving for school. She took a deep breath. Tomorrow, everything would change. The quiet girl was finally ready to reveal the part of her no one had ever seen. The next morning began quietly, but something about the air felt heavy, as if the whole house was holding its breath. I woke up before the sun rose, unable to sleep. The sky outside still looked dark, and the street was empty. I stayed in bed, listening to the silence around me. It was strange how peaceful everything looked from the outside when inside my mind everything felt unsettled. I finally got up and walked to the kitchen where the faint smell of last night's tea still lingered. I poured myself a glass of water and sat down, letting my thoughts wander. So much had changed in such a short time, and I couldn't help but wonder where all of it was taking me. Sometimes life pushes you forward even when you don't feel ready. That was exactly how these days felt. By the time the sun began rising, I felt a little lighter. The warm light slipping through the window made the room feel alive again. I stood up, stretched, and told myself one step at a time. And that was enough to get me moving. Around mid-morning, I received a call that pulled me straight out of my quiet routine. It was unexpected, and the voice on the other end sounded urgent but polite. The caller said they wanted to meet and talk about something important. I didn't fully understand their tone, but something inside me told me that the meeting might be necessary. Even though I felt nervous, I agreed. I got ready and stepped outside. The day had turned bright, and the wind felt cool against my face. I walked to the main road where people were moving about, some rushing to work, others casually strolling. Their normal routines made me feel calmer, as if I was blending into the flow of everyday life again. When I reached the meeting place, a small, quiet cafe, I found a seat near the window. A few minutes later, the person who had called me walked in. Their expression was calm but serious. As they sat down, they gently explained why they wanted to meet. They talked about recent events, the misunderstandings, and the problems that had been quietly building up. Their voice carried no anger, only concern. Listening to them made me realize how sometimes the smallest issues grow into bigger ones simply because no one speaks about them. It was strange to think how silence can create more trouble than words. While they talked, I felt a mix of relief and worry. Relief because they weren't upset. Worry because the situation needed careful handling. When the conversation ended, I thanked them and walked out of the cafe, breathing in the warm air. A part of me felt stronger, as if I had taken a small but important step. I knew things wouldn't fix themselves overnight, but at least I had started moving in the right direction. By noon, I reached home again. The house felt quieter than usual, almost too quiet. I made lunch for myself just to distract my mind. As I ate, I kept replaying the conversation from the morning. Some parts made me feel hopeful. Others made me question myself more deeply. After lunch, I decided to go for a walk. I needed space, not just physically but mentally. Sometimes walking helps things settle inside the mind like dust slowly sinking to the ground. As I walked through the streets, I noticed small things I had been ignoring for days, the sound of a child laughing in the distance, a man selling fruit while humming softly, the smell of fresh bread coming from a nearby bakery. These simple things reminded me how life continues whether we are ready or not. I found a quiet bench near a small park and sat down. The trees above me swayed gently, and the leaves rustled in the wind, creating a soothing whisper. I breathed deeply and let myself relax. I needed moments like this, moments that reminded me I was still human, still trying, still learning. As I sat there, I began thinking about the choices ahead of me. There were many uncertainties, many unanswered questions. Part of me wanted to run from all of it, to escape somewhere far away where no one knew me. But another part of me, perhaps the stronger part, wanted to stay and face everything. I knew that running might bring temporary relief, but it would never solve anything. After sitting there for a while, I decided to return home. When I walked in, I found an unexpected message waiting for me on my phone. It wasn't long, but the words carried weight. The message said they wanted to talk again, this time about something more complicated. They didn't explain much, but they mentioned that the situation had changed. I stared at the message for a long time. My chest tightened slightly, but I took a deep breath. Whatever this new situation was, I had to listen. I couldn't avoid it anymore, so I replied simply, asking when and where. Minutes later, they responded with a time later that evening. I felt a knot in my stomach, but I prepared myself for it. I spent the next few hours trying to keep my mind busy, cleaning the house, washing dishes, organizing things that didn't really need organizing. It was my way of calming down. When the evening finally came, the sky had already turned orange. I stepped outside and began walking to the meeting place.